of the retreat of the Preservation Commission on June 24, 2020. And I'll declare we have a quorum. We have at least 7 of the 9 commissioners, probably more to come. And I think without ado, I'll turn the meeting over to the moderator of the retreat, Commissioner Hackett.
Uh-oh. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm in this room. I might have to leave this room if it was unstable. My Wi-Fi was unstable, it said. So what did you say, Mark?
I called the meeting to order and turned it over to you to be the moderator.
All right. All right. So
During the meeting.
All right. So everybody can hear me because you can all hear me? Okay. So listen, I put this together and I thought, my goal was really to get us to talk about how we can be more effective in working with the public and the city. And so I just broke it into like the and navigate through through the web through that order. But if we have, what do we have? If we want to change it up, it's fine with me. And how long is this supposed to? Is this an hour or what? An hour and a half?
We lost you for a while there, Julie.
Is there some time for this?
An hour and a half.
9. Should I just move maybe?
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you.
Okay.
You
So can you, if it becomes difficult, is it difficult?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It difficult? Okay. You guys, I have to walk then, all right? I'm walking to another room. Talk amongst yourselves. Or you can see me walking.
I want to know why Sullivan is eating her dinner while we're all watching her.
I'm eating dessert.
Oh.
And Trevor, one other technical matter that I think it's probably being overly cautious because there's really no business to vote on or actions be taken. But if someone to make a motion for to allow participation electronically instead of physically in a meeting, and then can vote to allow that, just to be cautious.
What does that mean?
It was on the agenda, the item. Before we get into the business, we need to vote on allowing electronic participation.
Oh,
I move to suspend the rules and allow for an electronic meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It carries unanimously. All right, is Julie back?
Yeah, too many miles. Oops. Okay. Okay.
better.
All right. So did anybody hear what I said? I'll just start over. So, all right, so it's what is it, an hour and a half? I'm trying to, okay. So I just wanted to take us through this, and if we are, for the first piece of it, I'll just start with the first piece. So have you all tried to navigate onto the website to find, does everyone want to unmute or not? No?
What was the question?
I said no, because people are muted.
Some are.
Some are, okay. So my question for everyone is, have you actively tried to find, when, if you were just someone who was trying to access information from the commission, have you gone through on the website to try to figure out how to navigate that? And what are your comments about that? I'm starting from the beginning. If you're just, how do we help people access the site and get information they need? And so has anyone done that?
I
Yeah,
have.
I have. I feel like it's all right. There's a lot of information on the website, and that sometimes there's the links, there's repetitive links. So there's more than one link to the same form. And sometimes that's a little confusing. It does seem like it might be able to be a little bit more, like that front page could be more streamlined, like the outline. And then those links could then take you to the greater information, the more details and whatnot. And then also just kind of like capturing different audiences, whether it's, you know, someone just interested in all the old buildings that are in Evanston, whether it's the homeowner that is thinking about buying a house and doing work on it, and then the person that's got the house and needs, all of a sudden is going up for a permit and heard about this thing called the COA. And then just the random, you know, preservation person that's just looking for some more resources. So it does seem like that front page just has a ton of information, and it's good once you get through it all. It's just maybe would be better to have more just highlights on that front page and then those links to the more detail.
Yeah, I think what we did, sorry, what we did is Jack on here?
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I would say that Jack and Elliot and I spent a lot of time and we wrote those guidelines, and we were trying to figure out how to link them, you know, because there wasn't anything. I think actually the website was changed and things were taken off the website, and then you couldn't find the information.
Oh.
But, okay, I just got to get him out of here. So I think, but I agree. I still think it's complicated, and I still think there's redundancies. And I think
Right.
that in order to kind of look at it again, because I know, you know, Carlos spent time to put it up, and we spent a lot of time. I think that, you know, in terms of something that the commission does, I don't really want to do it again, but I would say that it would be like if we were thinking of things to be, you know, to try to break this up as we go through this retreat and say like, okay, what are the things that we can do? I think that is something, if somebody wanted to do some more work, because I think more work is important in terms of how you're navigating it. That could be something that you know, somebody here takes up on the commission.
I think I'm curious to know what supports the commission has other than Carlos, because I think I think there's a lot of great information. I totally agree with everything that was said. There's a lot of great information there. I think it's more a matter of kind of web page design and layout, you know, something that none of us know anything about, but we might be able to work with somebody within the city that deals with the city's website. You know, I mean, this wouldn't be something that Carlos would know anything about either. It's more like, you know, here are the things that we want people to be able to access. It's on the web page, but how do we rearrange it so that it can be really user friendly for people to, you know, all those different
Believe it or not, that is, I mean, we started out with something, and then we started out with one web person. That person left. I can't remember if we ended up with the second or third. And then, as Julie said, there were the changes made because they were changing the website. And a lot of what you see there is the city IT people putting it into their template, rather than what you might have done if you were doing your own website. If we go
I think it's very different than some of the other landing pages for some of the other,
Yeah.
you know, departments in the city. So maybe it's changed since then.
Well, think about this though. I'm curious, any of you that went in, how did you go into it? Because I was thinking about that today. What I mean by that is if you were just a citizen of Evanston, what did you start with to get yourself to that preservation site? Did
I
you
would
go
just
to
Google
like-
Evanston Historic Preservation.
Ah,
Yeah.
Yeah, and you get in that way. You get in that way.
so you don't
I-
go in via the commission and go in.
I mean, I think one of the things is that there isn't someone that there's not a person. Like Carlos was kind of doing it. And then he, you know, I mean, this is going to come up, but I think he's like one person. Carlos, you can speak up. But if we were going to look at it again, how could we do it in a way that, you know, that use what we have in there and then try to maybe have an introduction where you can just access the items. I'm not sure because we spend a lot of time doing this, but is there really, Carlos, to be honest, like, is there somebody who we can work with, or is it just you?
Well, IT has one person who will be our contact for any changes to the website. However, they, you know, like you said earlier, there's a template that they want to maintain. And once we ask for something to be changed, it's not unusual that they say, okay, this is how you do it, then you do it. They would not do it necessarily 100% for ourselves. Where somebody has to learn how to do it, and then we do it. So that's the time constraints.
I'm surprised they would let somebody, like if somebody wants to volunteer on the commission, they would let somebody on the commission mess with the city's website?
I don't think they would.
I don't know the answer for that. I don't think we have raised that question, but we can ask if that would be feasible. But I think that one way to facilitate the cleaning up of the website is by having all of us doing searches in any way, but take notes. What are you searching? What kind of the keywords or something? And you talk about redundancies, and I think that that can be resolved by copying that link that either is redundancy or does not lead you to nowhere. And another person, our staff, she would take that link and then remove it from the website, so that we're trying to clean up all links that may lead you to an old form or all information. Somehow, once we, let's say, update, let's say, the preservation ordinance, you might still be able to get the version prior to the current version somehow. So once we find that something is repetitive but old, we need to take note, what is the link? And then if you guys send that link to me, I can forward that to the person that cleans up those old links. But
I think we need to, I don't know, I'm hearing an echo, but you know, there's certain things that I was looking at when I looked at this agenda and looked at the website. You know, like we ran into it ourselves when we were having the Zoom meeting, and I found a listing of every landmark in Evanston. So it would be nice to have.
That is hard to find.
You see, well, it's on the landing page along with all sorts of other buried links on the landing page, but you click on it and you see a listing of addresses, but you can't find, there's no way to find the actual designation on why that's a landmark. Like if each one of those addresses was a link that linked to the PDF of its landmark.
Oh, right.
Status,
So
you know,
Right.
like there's a lot of talk about guidelines and things like that, but in terms of the actual information on why is this a historic district, why is this a landmark, you know, what can I, if somebody was researching their house to determine whether or not, you know, what's significant about their house in the eyes of the Historic Preservation Department of Evanston, they can't find that on the website. It always kind of circles back to call Carlos, which puts a terrible burden on everybody calling Carlos.
But Aleka, what the first thing that you do, the first thing that it says is you go to About My Place.
And it'll tell you it's a landmark. It'll tell you it's a landmark, or it'll tell you.
It doesn't link you back to the list of, it doesn't link you to if there's a document about the property.
No, the documents aren't linked. At one point the other night I found, and I don't know how I found it, and maybe Carlos knows this, the Lakefront Historic District had a really nice kind of interactive map that you could pull up the actual listings that tell you about the house. And so I don't know if that's even, it's not even on our page. I don't even know how I found that.
That is the 2012 Lakeshore Historic District Survey that's available online. I need to double check whether or not it's in our pages, but if it's not, I will include it, but I believe it is. I need to double check. I think the problem is when it's a good question, but I don't think there's a ideal answer for it, is that when anybody is searching for something, you don't really know what to look for. You guess something, you know, like a word or a place or something. Maybe what we need to do is have an index where these are the information you can find, and this is where you can find it, rather than, you know, everything goes, and if you find it, good luck.
That's fine, except the information isn't available there. Some of the core information, it doesn't appear is scanned to PDF format and available online. It circles back to, you're in the historic district or you have a landmark, and call Carlos.
Well, the best two sources for that is the 2012 survey and the 2015 inventory of landmarks outside historic districts. And the link for that is available in our website. But as far as the statement of significance, you know, we have encountered this issue of, you know, what do we do when somebody wants that during this period where it's all in hard copy. There are about 8 binders that hold about 800 landmarks that somebody has to have the time to scan each page, and each page is not loose, it's in a plastic sleeve that you had to take out, put it in the scanner, and scan it. So it's not like you can put necessarily 50 pages at a time and you scan fast. I mean, you could do it, but you have to still separate that.
Yeah,
you know?
So either an intern or Eric at the copy room could, you know.
So the solution for that is, for me, when I get an inquiry, every time I go to the books, then that's when I scan it. So I'm doing like one at a time, rather than trying to do it all at a time.
I just want to ask something, Carlos. How about if we I'd like to get at this from another direction. When people call you, do they already, just describe this process, do they already know like where their house is? Do they already know it's in historic district when they call? What happens just in that interaction? And have they looked at the website, or what happens?
I would say that at least 50% or more know that they either have a house in the historic district or they own a landmark, which has an improvement to, you know, when we didn't have the ordinance online where it lists all the landmarks. So I would say that it's not that everybody that calls doesn't know that they own a landmark or what a landmark is. But, you know, I get calls or emails recently, like people who want to buy the plaque for a landmark. And there was a gentleman who wanted to buy 2 plaques, one for his own house, which happens to be a landmark, and the other one for his parents that live in a historic district, but that house was not a landmark. So I had to explain this program is only for landmark owners the plaque is recognizing landmarks. So that type of information. The other type of information people want to know is, what do I need to do in order to present an application for replacing windows or any other type of application for roofs or additions, construction. They want to know when are the meeting dates.
And they don't, Carlos, I have a question. And do they read that stuff that we so laboriously worked on to put on?
I don't know, but I think maybe it's a good question I should ask every time somebody call and I say, okay, we have more information about it. But the way I feel personally is that if I kind of push, I don't feel I'm providing the service they're looking for. But what I can do is, okay, how did you find out? Maybe they would tell me, oh, I look online or somebody told me. Many times they say people have given me your name to call you. And that's very frequent. Say, okay, somebody referred me to you. But I think it's a good question I could ask, during the conversation. How did you know, whether you need to call me or that you own a landmark or something like that? Maybe they say we look at the website, or maybe they say my contractor told me, or my architect told me.
It's in trying to alleviate some of the pressure that gets put on you with someone, someone doesn't want to read information because it's too much information, they won't, and they'll just call to say like, what do I have to do, right?
Right, and many times, and I would not say necessarily every single time, but many times when somebody calls, let's say a realtor, that's when I take the opportunity and say, okay, you want to know if this is a landmark or historic district, I show you how, and I spend time on the phone, go to the website, go to About My Place, you open that link, and they are going with me, and they say, okay, this is how you find whether or not you have a landmark or not. And they seem to remember. Sometimes the same person would call me again, just to, and I said, well, I don't say this, but I'm thinking we already talked about this some time ago. She forgot or he forgot.
There's a really good FAQ, frequently asked questions. I think it's in the link that for the COA for major work application.
Mm-hmm.
And it also includes that the map of the historic districts.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two really good quick resources that have a ton of information, just like quick references, that if something like, if those two resources were on that front page, I think it would redirect a lot of that telephone traffic away from Carlos.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, so,
Good,
yeah.
it was a good FAQ, really good FAQ.
So I think what was supposed to happen, but it maybe didn't, is that, so the guidelines you read through and then you find these links. And those links were also, we had imagined, I think Jack or Elliot, tell me if I'm wrong, that they also were appearing simultaneously, like just as a listing. So you didn't have to go through the whole damn, narrative to find the link, but it was over at the side. So you could get the document, you could go to About My Place and you didn't have to navigate. And that never happened. So it just didn't. So you have to go through this and then you find these links buried in the document.
Yeah.
So that would, I would say, is there, maybe from this whole retreat, we have some people who might want to continue for, working on something like this, and that we can like move on, because this isn't going to be solid. I mean, we spent like a year doing this and it sort of is.
2 years.
2 years, but it is where it is. It's more than it was, but still needs more. So I don't know, I'd love to have, somebody just like say, okay, I'm going to continue looking at this with Carlos.
By the way, for those who haven't looked, it's not the same if you try it on a handheld device than it is if you do it on your desktop or your laptop.
That's a whole nother.
That's a whole.
Yeah, but
it's not as neatly organized. It's organized differently and all the rest. Some of the issues even come up depending on how one goes in and accesses it. I mean, I was just looking, even paragraphs are broken up.
Yeah.
On any kind of phone.
I think that has something to do with whether the city's website is, you know, also mobile efficient or something like that.
I mean, you have to actually write it two different ways to some extent. And I think some of the stuff, even those of you, you know, Carlos, when you were talking about the two different inventories, when I looked on my phone, I don't see those at all.
Yeah.
I don't see any reference to them.
So, you know what? I think I'm gonna say, if nobody wants to just say at this retreat, I'm gonna make this my cause. I'm gonna put a list together, and somebody, I mean, the thing about the commission is, like, I know it's a lot of work, I guess, but it is important that everybody on the commission continues to do work outside of it when you're sitting on it. So I know some of you have, and I don't, you know, it just takes some time, so I'm gonna, after this, I think I'm just gonna put together a list of the things that, you know, need work on, and then someone should step up and continue that cause, because there's a lot of stuff here. So
I'm happy to do a little work on the website. I've actually built websites before, so it's not
that's great.
familiar territory.
Yay!
Do you know what
That's
platform the city
great.
uses?
Jamie, you never should have offered.
I know.
Yeah.
I was sitting back here with that information. Do we know what platform they use?
So we just have a contact management system. You know, it's probably proprietary or with a vendor. Vision, I think, is what it's called.
Okay.
So when you go in and edit it, it kind of has an appearance of a Word type editing, where you can do some stuff there. You can then insert code if you really want to do that as well.
Okay.
Well, the problem now is, and you know, that's the other thing, is they may have been working in HTML and now they're in WordPress and you don't know what they're doing. There's a lot of that goes on too. I'm discovering that on a couple of sites.
Sure.
You know,
But let's just, okay.
what they write in and
How
decide.
So I think you said this, was this in some sort of project grant that the Lakeshore Historic District got, this map.City of Evanston Lakeshore Historic District, where
Yeah, we had a 70-30 grant to do the survey and the inventory.
for just that district, but not
for the historic, well, only for the Lakeshore, and then the other one was all the landmarks outside historic districts. So ideally, the next target should be the Rich Historic District for an inventory. I'm not sure if funds will be available again because of obviously the COVID situation. I know that the staff at Springfield, they're also working from home, and it's very hard to get a hold of them. I have tried for other information that I needed, and it's hard to get them responding right away or within 48 hours. It takes a little longer than that, and mainly it's because they don't have the access to the resources at home that they might have in their offices.
Well, the Lakeshore Historic District survey was a resurvey.
Sorry?
The Lakeshore Historic Survey was a resurvey, but I think that even some of our older information, without resurveying the houses, we could put up on the website. I guess I would like to see people, because I've gotten a few calls, and honestly, you know, even as a commissioner, I find it hard to find information, and I always feel bad because I know how burdened, you know, how much work Carlos has on his plate, but I'm like, you know, I don't think you can get that piece of information unless you call Carlos. And a lot of it is small information that, you know, it would be really nice to be able to direct them to the website so that it takes some of that burden off of you, and then they can come with the more detailed questions down the line.
Well,
Okay.
I think that the index that I believe Julie's referring, I think we can do that. And like we can put it on the page where we have the agendas and minutes. That's probably the most frequently visited because people want to see the packets.
Right.
So from the links that we have in the guidelines, I can create a table with those same links, and it will be a quick reference to those topics. So they don't necessarily have to read the entire page about the guidelines. They just will be just links. I believe I can do that without my major, spending of time. It's just copy and paste within a table that I can create for quick references. But I believe that if we all spend some time, and maybe Jamie could help us how to do this better. It's basically doing searches in our website. Write it down, what are you searching and what do you find? What kind of link you have? And then copy that link, and then we know whether the link is current or old, or it doesn't exist. Sometimes the link that doesn't exist anymore, but is still floating in the website. I think that would be one way to clean it. But everybody will have to commit some time just to develop a list of things they like to see, and then you provide, okay, I want to see how many landmarks. I want to see how many buildings Ernest Mayo built, that type of questions. When was the historic district adopted by city council, that type of thing. Now, those are questions that not always can be placed on the search and something will come up. But sometimes it picks a word or two that will lead you to something that is available.
I have a concern I wanted to bring up on this subject if I could. Am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. Carlos, you mentioned landmarks outside historic districts. I was involved with that project to quite a large degree. And my memory is that that project never was completed because funding ran out and all the surveys were not completed. So can you give us an update on where that project stands?
No, the project was completed. Every building was surveyed. What we ran out of, not money, but it was more time and also the volunteers. They were looking at all permits, and we didn't have a chance to do that additional information. But most of the bulk of the information is there. Like for the Lakeshore Historic District, we have more information of permits that were issued, when was it designated. I think all of that is there. So we finished the project, but not to the level that we would have liked to, but it's there.
One of the reasons that project came about, of course, was that homeowners didn't realize they were landmarks, and we were getting problems with homeowners wanting to make renovations, restorations, windows, and they didn't realize their homes were landmarked. And so those people are still all out there, and many probably still don't know that they have landmarked homes.
So
we actually went to Cook County, and all those landmarks have been registered. So
okay. Well, that's
we know.
Yeah, that was done, and that legally, Jack, they can no longer claim they didn't know.
Okay, I'm glad that was done.
Can I ask another question about this? So I had asked this before, so I just don't remember the answer. If you have a house that's landmarked, now the Evanston landmark, and it also has easements from the Illinois landmarks, and you come, because I know such a property, and you have to go before the commission, but the easement is actually more restrictive. That when you get Illinois landmarks, the easement's more restrictive. How is that? Who knows that information? Because I don't remember the Preservation Commission ever hearing about properties that are already have easements. So how does that information get disseminated?
Well, if there's a house that for instance, Landmarks Illinois has an easement, they will send me their inquiry, you know, are you going to be looking at this building next meeting? And I will say yes, and they say, okay, just let us know the outcome of it, that type of thing. We don't have any control over what the agreement is between the owner, and so I don't really get too much into, you know, what they're doing or anything like that, because basically they are more restrictive in many ways than what the ordinance would allow us.
Yeah, they are.
And the same thing with the state of Illinois. They will just send me a kind of certificate that they have been approved by them, and that's it, you know. But again, where I'm concerned about is what happens at the local level. And I'm really aware of that in the sense that in my history with the commission, I only had one case that the commission approved. The owner later applied for the assessment freeze program, and he was denied. So he was really upset about that because he thought that the commission had the last word. And I had to explain to him locally under our ordinance, but we are not in charge of the assessment freeze. And since then, I have recommended when I become aware that somebody's going to apply for it, or if somebody has to do some large addition or restoration, I will let them know there is an incentive for you, either Landmarks Illinois or the state of Illinois. You can apply for these programs if you want, but be mindful that if you deviate from what they agree, it would not be valid. So we will review it locally, you will get a permit, but if you deviate from whatever they approve, you're taking a risk to be voided. So that is because I have one experience with that in all the 20 plus years I've been working with the city.
Well, I don't understand if they deviate because one of those groups either asks for more or does something else, it never comes back to the commission. How does the commission know?
No, because they're deviating from not what we did, but what they agreed with either Landmarks Illinois or the state.
But isn't it useful, like if we knew, because if we knew which properties, which landmark properties had restrictive easements, that we just knew that. So if somebody came before us, sometimes I have to say, because I've been in this situation, if there's a buyer of a property, like they did not know that they had easements on their property. This came up with a Shaw House in Lake Forest, and it was really an odd situation. And so to help the homeowner, I'm just wondering, do we know which properties, which landmark properties have easements, have Illinois, you know, are already have received like Illinois landmarks and easements? Can we know that?
The answer is no, but I think that if the opportunity is now to ask directly to Landmarks Illinois and the state to provide a list of those properties that have asked, I can ask them, I mean, they can provide. Yeah. What I'm telling you is what I found out either during or after the fact.
Yeah, I understand. But so, maybe we could get that list because there's not that many that have them. And I think that's just useful information for us all to have. Like if you wrote up a property that, you know, it really, it's more to like help the homeowner. Sometimes the homeowner doesn't actually understand something because they purchased it from someone else who's placed easements upon it.
So that would be something we'd add to the About My Place thing?
I don't think we have to add it. I think we would just know as a commission if it was, I was thinking like if it came before the commission as a property because it was in a historic district, or it was a landmark and they wanted to change some windows, but they already had the easements. Well, they really couldn't change any windows. We shouldn't even be voting on it.
Well, to me, that is something, because I guess I'm thinking of this in everything, not only what can help us as commissioners, but what can help somebody who owns a home.
Yeah.
You know, we want to get as much information like that out to and I think the About My Place thing, the Evanston 311 About My Place,
Oh, it could.
have it listed on, is it in a local historic district? Is it a landmark? Is it local landmark or federal landmark? And, there could be another thing. Is there a state easement,
I think that's an Illinois landmark. Well, can we
Well,
get,
can I just say something about that? One of the things that you have to remember, the easement from Landmarks, Illinois is for life, whereas the state assessment freeze is only for 8 years.
Well, the state
Okay.
assessment freeze doesn't really affect us. If they have the state assessment freeze, it's
Right, what I'm talking about is the work that they have to do in order to get it.
Oh, that's.
well, to get it, that's not something.
that's not something we, yeah, I'm just saying, like, I think that the Illinois landmarks is like, there's not that many properties that have them in Evanston. So
Yeah.
maybe we could get that list and then we could see how we might want to.
Yeah, I will ask IT if that can be incorporated into About My Place. I don't know the answer for that, but I can add the question.
Yeah, I think
Add
that's
another line once we get the list.
Carlos,
okay.
what I don't understand is if there is that easement, aren't they notified of even a commission hearing? Because it's theoretically, it's the equivalent of a lien almost. I mean, they should not only be aware of it, but they should actually be present because they're as much an applicant. I mean, you just gave the example
Yeah.
on facade. It seems to me that it shouldn't even, under those circumstances, somebody should be there from Landmarks, because why is the owner coming in with a proposal unless they can come in and say, here, it's already been approved by Landmarks?
Well, they are subscribed to our website, and to my understanding is they get our agenda and minutes, and that's when they call me before or after. So I don't think we have, I personally don't think we have control over what a private institution is dealing with.
No, we don't. I just think it's information.
I
It's just
understand that, but I don't think we should expect that they should be there where we
Oh,
don't
well,
have.
Ellie,
It's no different than a neighbor showing up and saying, we've got certain.
yeah, but that's
But
not
it's
up to the
totally up to them.
commission. Yeah, I agree with Carlos.
Is it
Partially.
a notification thing though? Is there a process where we should be notifying Landmarks officially as like a?
I think so. That's my point.
But I don't know if the building that we are looking at has an easement or not. They do get to my understanding, they are subscribed, and I've been receiving calls over the years from them either before or after the meeting on a project that they have reviewed. So if we had to, in other words, I would have to call every single time to them or send the agenda to them in advance and say, are any of these buildings with an easement?
No, I think that was the point.
Yeah, we could just reach out to Landmarks and send us.
We have a list of those that are, period.
Yeah, I think we just have the list, right?
Right, and that's what I asked, I suggested earlier, to get the list from them. But then they will probably, if we can agree with them that every time they have a new easement, that they should let us know.
Well, here's the thing. What's the point of a notifying after? We've gone and approved something and then they come running in and saying, whoops, you had no.
No, but Elliot, you're missing the point. It doesn't matter what we do in terms of getting the permit itself. Is whether or not they're going to lose the status with the state or with Landmarks. That's totally separate from what we're doing here.
Elliot, I totally get what you're saying, because so I think maybe it's just a question of if Carlos talks to Susan Germain or whatever, Illinois Landmarks, and we get this list, and it's not that many, and then we can have it, and then we can know if a property comes up. Because actually, I'm just telling you, there's a property that I looked at, I don't know actually, I know they were changing windows, and I don't know if they did anything. And they just might have changed their windows, whatever, because the guy was angry with, that there were easements that he didn't know about. So I'm just saying that it's just communication, so that we're not voting on something that can't be changed because it is an easement.
My point is that they need to know before the meeting. There's no point after. I've got a client, on the near north side, and essentially their facade, if you want to put it in simple terms, belongs to Landmarks. And if they wanted to do some work on it, Landmarks has to approve it.
Yeah,
So what's the point of us going through a meeting
I agree. I
without having
totally agree.
Landmarks either notified ahead of time or literally reviewing the project in advance, and in the same way that we've gotten letters from other agencies?
It should be, the process should be, if a homeowner has easements and they know about them, they go to Illinois Landmarks first
Yeah.
to see if they can do what they want to do before they ever come to the commission and waste the commission's time or waste their own time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it should
When I
be.
find out about a project that might be using the easement, the tax assessment, I always recommend go to the state first, get that approval, come back to us with the same plan, same drawings that you submitted to the state. So there's no discrepancy about what the commission saw and approved locally. So that's my recommendation when I find out somebody is applying or will apply for that. I always recommend, don't come here, because if the commission approves something and then you go to the state may not necessarily concur with the commission in every single aspect of your application.
Okay, so what percentage of the people that you talk to on a daily basis does any of this that we've been talking to for the last 5 minutes even apply to?
Very, very small percentage.
Yeah.
I don't know,
I mean,
10% or less.
I think we should focus on, like, what is the majority of the homeowners in
That's
Evanston?
fine, but I think it's just tweaking. We're just talking about tweaking something, like get the list, we have it, and we can move on. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
why don't we try to cover your other topics, because we're like halfway through.
Good work.
We gotten to the sliver.
Well, they're big topics. All right, let's see.
I think
All right, let's talk about this one. Let's talk about when we, and actually I think this is important to hear, when the commission gets drawings, projects, they've gone through Carlos, and I guess I'm asking, how can we, okay, because I have seen this, how can we change it up so that we are getting either on some projects better drawings, that we're not reviewing things that just don't have enough information? Is there something that is there some way to, Carlos, you're one person, how can that process so that we're getting the most definitive kind of drawings to review? And I think that because we are getting stuff that sometimes we can't review because we can't understand it. So is there something in that process that we can change or help? Or
We have a checklist with the application of things that are required.
Right. I know.
The issue for me, and this is what I spend most of the time, is when I get an application, I have to go through the list and then call the owner and say, or the architect, this is what is missing from your application. There is a point where it's not unusual that either the owner or the contractor or the architect will be upset because all of a sudden they need to spend more time and more money to do that. So they're not necessarily responding, oh yeah, we'll do this, no problem. It's more like, do I really need to do this? Now I need to talk to my client. And we didn't put it on the budget. And some people have the means to do that, others don't. For instance, 1204 Sherman, if you recall that project for the windows, they came twice in front of the commission, and then they did not show for more than 2 consecutive times. And now they're going to be in front of the commission again with a different contractor. It's been months since the ability for them to be able to come back with something that was very simple. Can they show that the windows will be compatible or not? And that's the issue, that I have many applicants that are not professional architects. They don't have the means, or they don't want to spend the money. And I think we have to make lemonade with the lemons we get. I can hold as much as possible, but people complain it takes so long to go to preservation. And it's because I'm holding projects so I can get information.
Can they download examples of complete applications?
Oh, yes. I mean,
ideals.
We do have samples. I mean, we have the packets where people can access freely those packets and see what, and I have referred people to certain dates and when I saw something or remember something that is similar to what they're proposing. But again, it's not that they see the document, it's whether or not they have the means to replicate that.
Yeah, one concrete thing that as commissioners we can do is let Carlos know if in advance of the meeting, if you feel the application is inadequate. I mean, I know I frequently look at the applications and just decide that there is insufficient information, I think like half the time, to really figure out what's going on. And sometimes they are cleared up by the presentations, but I know I often send Carlos emails asking if he could ask the applicant to provide, specific pieces of better drawings. Now, Carlos, I wonder, is Friday before the soonest we can get the packets? Like if we got it a day or two earlier, like Thursday even, maybe people could get your questions on Friday.
I think we can manage that to the extent that I'm not sure if we should be doing that before it goes out to the public, which is Friday by 5 p.m. I don't know if there's an issue with that. Maybe Scott can help us with that, because everybody should get the information around the same time. And the other thing is, if you're looking at a project and then you start communicating among yourselves, maybe you won't do that. But if, could happen where say, okay, we cannot have like a discussion or something outside the public meeting.
I don't think we're proposing. But one of the things you can stress to the applicants, I think, throughout the process is that if they don't provide adequate information, it's going to delay their application, and we're trying to help them get it through. But, in addition, even if you post it for the public and us basically at the same time, very frequently people bring in supplementary material or furnish it to you the day before the meeting, and that generally works. But
we've been doing that, Mark. Not to the extent that perhaps would be ideal, but definitely I've been pushing applicants to bring better material or better presentation. I even coach them how to spend their time with the meeting so that they don't tell us why you're doing this, tell us what are you doing, what materials are you using. So I obviously understand that we should and could have better applications, but I would say that it depends who is the applicant. It's not going to be universally the best. Even if you look at some of the applications, somebody takes the time to type the application, others they just handwritten, hard to understand what they're writing. Some people say see attachment, and then the attachment is very little information, or photographs. It's just a plethora of different styles and different ways of presenting. I just try to put together somewhere that is more consistent, even though it's not the same. What I was trying to tell you is, if we want to have that level of presentation, it will take me to do more work, like taking each case by hand in hand to the applicant, unless there's somebody who already been in the commission, like an architect. It takes time.
Carlos, I have a question about that. Has it ever happened where you've had some commissioners, or is it illegal to have commissioners who are volunteering to, sometimes we review stuff, but to sort of help sift through some of that stuff? Has that ever happened?
Yes. We used to have the review and technical assistance committee.
Right.
So when we get the application, when the deadline comes and I have all the applications that week, let's say the deadline is on a Tuesday, by Thursday, this group will meet with me, and then it had to be a public meeting too. Sometimes the architect will come, sometimes the owner will come, but then it becomes another meeting with it. It was like, you know, which one is the best? But anyway, the long story is that committee would recommend this can be done administratively. They need more information about this. Then I will inform the applicant, this is what this committee is asking you to present by this date. Okay.
Was it helpful or not?
It was helpful to some extent, but then you know, it creates, in other words, I had to do more because I need to have a new notice for the meeting. I had to take the notes for that. Then I had to let the person know what the commission or the committee was asking. It's doable, but it's more to do.
But I thought that it worked because in most cases, it was often not the architect, but a lot of these homeowners that don't have the technical knowledge. They'd come in and at least a couple of commissioners would say, here's some of the things you can do. And essentially they'd lead them in the right direction. And it resolved a lot of issues that didn't have to be reinvented at the meeting, at the actual commission meeting. I don't know that technical assistance was such a bad thing.
I didn't say it was. I'm saying is that's the way it works.
I mean, also, if the idea is not to review the application on its merits,
correct,
but simply to have somebody look at the application to advise the applicant if there's complete information they can provide so that they have a better, you know, so they'll have a better chance of getting approved. I don't think that's a meeting. I think it's just the commissioner wouldn't comment or decide, make any decisions. They would just say, you know, I think this information is missing and you should add this to your packet.
There's a way to do this. We will have no more than 2 commissioners present at those meetings. Even 1 will be sufficient. So we don't have to advertise this as a meeting.
Well,
and then we had to get the time for you guys to say, okay, I can come, you know, or I'll volunteer for the next couple months, and then we can rotate too.
I mean, it seems like that, I'm asking because it seems like that might be helpful but I mean, would people volunteer to do that? It's not for more work for you, Carlos. It's for trying to sort of, you know, so.
You want to make sure that the applications to get to the meeting are ready for review, and hopefully for approval. I get that, yeah. All I'm saying is that it will require all of us to dedicate the time to do it.
Yeah. So what do people think about that? Not Jack, because he's like not on this.
Jack went through some of those, I think. I think I always expected it. I was going to one. And Mark, why is it any different than mediation prior to the trial? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I would volunteer
ahead of time. And in some cases, at that technical assistance meeting, it can be such, and Carlos just said it, it then maybe becomes enough, you know, sufficiently worked to the fact that it becomes administrative approval and it never has to become a commission item. I mean, if you could get it past 1 or 2 people and everybody goes, this is great, and now, you know, it can be approved by Carlos. I mean, some of those window things, some of the roof things.
I mean, I think that an important component is that we should be thinking about, and the reason to do this is, if it would work, is we need to be making this as easy as possible for people in Evanston to make changes to their historic homes. You know, they shouldn't be seeing us as this huge many month long process that they have to go through. They, you know, we should try to do whatever we can within reasonableness to help people come before us and get approved to get guidance on changes to their homes.
Well, I agree what the sentiment is, and I think that we can get started doing this for the month of August. And what we need to have is 2 or 1 commissioner available for a meeting in my office, or in this case would be another virtual meeting with the applicant or architect or our contractor, homeowner, whoever might be available. And then we can, you know, kind of advise them, this is what is good about your application, this is what is missing, this is what the commission would like to see more of, detailed drawings, whatever. we continually ask people during the meeting.
How does that differ from what you did the other day by sending that window thing to Ken and me? Ken and I.
The difference is that it was the three people that are the elected officials, or the, you know, you as the secretary, Mark as the chair, and Ken as the vice chair. So have people of certain weight to give me their opinion about something. That
So,
and that worked, but we're not talking to directly to the applicant. It was the intermediary.
I have a question. So do the applicants have to be at this pre-meeting?
They should.
Well, the idea is that they were there so that they can hear what the committee will have to, advise them.
but you don't have to do that for every application, because some of the applications are quite good. I mean, it would be for something where you thought like, oh, this is really needs some help here. Because I mean, there's some applications that are
So
fine.
Carlos, you would handpick the, you know, upcoming applications that might be more problematic that you recommend that?
I think if we do that, it will simplify to some extent the number of projects. On the
Well,
other
that's
hand,
what I would suggest.
yeah, and you know, so there are seasoned architects or contractors that know what the commission looks for, and there are other architects that the first time they're doing a preservation project in Evanston, or the first time they do a preservation project at all, or the homeowner who just bought their property and they're just finding about being a landmark or historic district property. There's a combination of different ways how an application can go right or can go wrong. It's a matter of getting the application and determining what's missing and what needs to be
So
included.
I guess why don't we try it for the next meeting? Carlos, you'll look at this stuff, you'll say, oh, this really needs some help. And I mean, I would volunteer.
We did it on that one.
I would do it with you.
The rabbi.
I would do it with you, Julie, for August.
Fun.
Remember the
Not that bad. I think Carlos is right though, but I'm not sure. You know, I think you have to be careful about which ones you choose and which ones you don't. And I'm not sure it's as simplistic as, you know, good architects bad. I mean, some of them are just going to fight you because even if they're good,
but I know, but Carlos he'll have to make the decision. So there's some filtering out, and he's the one who's going to be doing that. I don't think we're going to be looking at all unless, you know, it seems like we should try it that way. Don't you think?
Well, let's see what we get for August,
Okay.
and let me decide.
We got like 2 window projects.
it's all the window people that only show up with the window contract.
And
the rep from the factory. Those seem to be the ones that have been causing more problems.
Okay. I know that we're all right. So, well, this was good. That's okay. I want to go on to the commission. The commission, and I want to talk about. I know Mark had this specific question, which we should get to before 9, which is when we go to talk about what is the commission telling me and do I understand it? I know that Mark had some concerns about how we deal with new construction versus additions and remodeling projects. And before we go back to say, like, are we consistent with our messaging? I think I'd just like to talk about that a little bit. And Mark, maybe you should share with the group what you see the problems are with new construction.
Well,
evaluating it.
I think that's about, I think that's a host of different issues. I guess, one of my concerns is whether, I thought it'd be nice to have the chance to talk about what we should be reviewing and what we should not be, what the limits of our power should be. and I guess it does relate to the communications issue you mentioned that certainly, you know, I mean, frequently at meetings we're voicing opinions as to, you know, what the architect ought to be doing, and it's hard to separate some of the preservation issues from some of the, you know, if this were me, this is what I prefer to do. I guess, you know, new construction projects have really plagued us because, I mean, when you're dealing with a modification of like an existing landmark home, it's a, you know, there's a pretty limited set of you know, of indicia on the existing home, and it's pretty easy. You know, there are all kinds of reference points in the, you know, existing home, what's on the other side of it, and, you know, what the other windows are, et cetera. For new construction, it's incredibly subjective. You know, citizens come before us and use, you know, as the reference point, the house across the street, is it a house a block over? Is it the house next door? And then, you know, there's sharp divisions as to whether, you know, very modern styles are acceptable, whether the home should pay, you know, some kind of, it should have some kind of reference to historic structures that may be right next door. So I'm not even, you know, it seems to me it's a very lengthy and hard discussion. I guess, you know, truthfully, my concern is that we don't always kind of respect the limits of what we should be deciding, what we should be refraining from exercising our powers to limit. And of course, then one of the interlocking problems is we get a lot of citizen pressure to exercise that power to stop projects for reasons that are really not preservation reasons, that are, you know, people don't want the house next door, don't want a construction site. So I'm not sure, you know, again, I think my concern is that we be more restrained in our exercise of power that over projects that have less to do with preserving existing structures. But I don't, you know, again, there's so much you could talk about, and I'm not even sure what.
Yeah,
what we
I mean,
think.
Mark, I think, I mean, I understand that it's more open-ended, but we still have these standards for new construction, and basically it's like, it's all about, it seems to me, it's always about those standards, and it's always about the context. So if it's new and you've got, you know, if you've got like 5 different houses on your block and they're completely different stylistically and et cetera, then the context is really different, and you're looking at a new home in a different way than if, you know, like you were on the Edgemere Court property, you know, the whole issue with Edgemere Court. But so I think it's just that there's still those standards, and there's still, you know, there's still like composition of windows, you know, roof forms, all of that. And so, you know, I think when we've had issues with the new construction, it's basically been someone saying, well, I should be, this is what happens. Let's face it, like for the problems, I should be able to build exactly what I want, and no one should tell me what to do. And sorry, I've got to come before the commission for that. And that's when we have problems, and they may come back 3 or 4 times, and that it has happened because we've seen it. And whatever we say, it doesn't really matter. You know, so, but that's, it's not that we are exerting too much pressure, is that they're not really listening, and the standards are really pretty clear in I think with new construction, it's still pretty clear.
I mean,
So
I think you're talking about building on the block, you know, that is John Elfin, is that his name, building the house next to the Oscar Mayer mansion. I mean, his initial design was, you know, extremely modern house, set far, extremely back, and it was on a block that was basically all very impressive historic homes. And so it was, you know, I mean, clearly, you know, you could look at that as the clearest examples of something that didn't comply with any of the preservation standards. On Edgemere Court, by contrast, you know, there were multiple different styles. There was a great deal of pressure from the
But Mark, I don't
residents.
agree with.
I mean, again, I'm not saying we shouldn't apply the standards, but I thought, you know, due to the subjectivity of it, the extreme subjectivity of it, I think we were unmoored by what to do. I mean, I think that the opinions differed so sharply, and the lack of, you know, again, the lack of clear reference points, the
Yeah, but
large
okay.
reference points.
But I
made it
think
very
that was a disagreement.
I think there's another, let me try something else. First of all, I think in the case of the one up on Forest, you're talking about the modern version, but that wasn't the first version, because he actually presented one at the time that they had to do the subdivision for the building next door, which meant we reviewed it and approved something based on a schematic of,
Right.
here's something that's really compatible with the
And
neighborhood.
then it's
then
gone.
years later, he comes in with something else. And then when that had the blowback, he basically retrenched. So that was the third version, but we shouldn't be faulted for what was the second version. I want to bring up.
No, my example of that was something that works, that you know, was very clear that it was, you know, inconsistent with neighborhood and didn't meet the standards. That was my example of something that's really clear.
That's why I think the standards, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why the standards are so important. They do help overcome the subjectivity that you're talking about, Mark. I think the standards do really help to clear the way for away from subjectivity.
Yeah, Edgemere Court had every house is different on the street, several modern
Mark,
houses.
I don't think so.
and there were
Every
several-
house has. Okay, this is like, I think this is just like two commissioners disagree.
Well,
So that's what I think.
Mark, I think the bigger problem are the people who come in and they're in a district, but they're not necessarily a landmark, right? There's the issue of being in the district and still having to comply with the guidelines when you're not even necessarily contributing other than you happen to be next door. And I think those are the ones that are most problematic, because they come in and say, look, I bought a 1960s ranch house. Don't blame me for the fact that there's 3 landmark Victorians next door. And yet we're holding them to some standard where the home never complied to begin with, because it wasn't even reviewed when it was built to any standard. And that's true for a lot.
Yeah, but I think the commission has been, you know, if you're doing a remodeling to like a ranch burger on the lake next to some historic home, then I think the commission has been fairly lenient about some things, because, you know, you're not going to make something fantastic about, I mean, you know, it's like you're not going to transform this thing that already looks like it does. It's when it's new, it's like new construction where it's completely new. But I agree with Jack. You still have the standards. They're very specific: roof form, composition of windows, massing, scale, all of those things. You have those tools to use when you're evaluating the houses on the street. And if there's one house that differs from all the other houses, then as a commissioner, you weigh that, I suppose. You know, if that's so I actually think that it's the same. I agree with Jack, like the standards are still there to help you. So I don't know, but I do think that we get off track as a commission. Elliot and I maybe do that. You get off track, you start talking about something else, you're trying to help someone solve a problem, which is
really not supposed to be doing that, I suppose. But and I think some of
No, wait, let's focus on that. We're not supposed to be doing that. We're not supposed to be doing that.
And then you get the guy who says, well, tell me what I'm supposed to do. And you have to say, I can't tell you.
You're right.
And, you know, I think it's called, I know it's pornography when I read it, but I don't, you know, I can't tell you why. This is a bad architecture, but I'm not going to tell you why it's bad. I mean, I think, but, you know, the reason I brought up non historic buildings in some of these districts, those are the people that really complain, because they're saying, I went through this 3-month process for my ranch house just because of an accident of geography, not because of anything else. And I think those are the ones that I think probably get more complaints about. Jack will probably tell us about the whole history of those.
Maybe we do need to change the rules and regulations for something like that. Like if you're a non-contributing structure in a historic district and it doesn't affect the massing and the volume, then
A lot of
administratively.
people just go
Just-
home.
Yeah.
You know, I think we did, because I mean, I have seen projects that have gone through where there's this one, you know, where on a ranch house, there are these were dormers and you could see it, but we just weren't as, you know, it was pretty easy evaluation by the commission or critique or whatever. And that's because of like what it was really, and where, and the fact, and I have seen that happen here. I mean, maybe when you start on the commission, your first year, maybe you're like, oh my God, you know, everything is a battle. And then maybe by the 6th year, you're like, okay, some of these things.
Don't tell that to all those newer commissioners.
I don't know, because Elliot and I are coming up, but I do agree with Ken that some of the things, you know, and also the facades, you know, how you evaluate the rear facade.
Well, just wait, all those ranches are coming up on 50 years old anyway, so they're stuck to have their own significance.
Yeah, maybe some of them, yeah. But I know, I do think that there's a way of evaluating, you know, the different facades of property if it's not landmarked. I do think in a landmark house, you know, there is the question of which facades are most important that you have to evaluate and think about, as opposed to just the front facade, which I think, you know, we do. So, but
like
We
the
don't.
house a
We
couple
worry about
people-
everything from the public way.
except from that back, you know,
Oh, except from the lake.
the lake.
Yeah.
It's only the lake. You can still do the alley. We're still doing the side streets if need be. I think it's really just, it's the lake. And I don't necessarily agree with it.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with that either at all. But, you know, we were overruled, Elliot.
Well, it was one of the larger landowners in town that subdivided their
But,
property.
you know, before, so I don't know. I mean, I hear you, Mark, but I actually think you just keep going back. If you can't make sense of the standards within the, you know, the relationship to new construction, because there's nothing, the context is crazy and different. I mean, then that's a problem. But
Mark, was there a sunset provision when you were rewriting even the standards as you guys, because that was a separate group from the one that Jack, Julie, and I were part of. And everybody was rewriting the standards. Did anybody think in terms of in 5 years we should revisit it based on the experience of those people, or the experience with the, let's call them the newer standards, the revised standards? I'm just curious.
No, I mean, I think it had been, I mean, I don't know how long it had been since the ordinance was really written, like 20 years or so.
Well,
1994 was the original version of the current ordinance with similar language of the standards, which were amended for the latest version of it. I think that in the planning, in the best practice of planning, you know, communities would tend to see their ordinances or this type of documents every 10 years, just to take a look. Because it really takes a lot of effort to amend those, and also it's costly. So it seems like to have a 10 years kind of a middle ground. But I was gonna go back a little bit to the standards and how I see it as the staff for the commission for all these years. And I think that one of the issues I have is when we start talking about things that are interesting, but not necessary to the discussion. that takes time from the other applicants waiting for the review to come to them. And I think that when we are trying to help them, we should actually let them know what standards are not met rather than telling them what they should do, because that avoids us from designing for them. But if somebody has a standard, for instance, not the same material, we should say, this is the standard that is currently not met, which is you're not matching the material, without telling them it has to be this and that. Although they might ask the question, well, then what, right? Is it iron or is it aluminum? Or, well, and you can say, consistently, we've been approving hardy board or wood, or in case of windows, all wood or all aluminum clad, but you decide which one is, in your case, the best. But I don't think necessarily we have to even spend time to explain how something should be built, because that's not our role. That's why they have a plan examiner that looks at the code. So what we're looking at is the appearance and the material. I know that it's very tempting to say, well, it's not designed well or put together well, but that's what we're not reviewing. So I think we should restrain ourselves from trying to tell the architect or how to build it. Is whether or not it's going to look the way they present it. And I know that I do appreciate many times what you have to say, but I think that, and I learn from it too, because when I review it, then I remember what you guys said at the meeting about certain things, and then I'm looking from that perspective as well, recommendations. But during the meeting, you know, we seem to spend sometimes time that could be not as productive by not addressing the standards more directly. And then, you know, these are the standards. I mean, we can list number 1, 2, 3 at this moment are not met. Not to go back.
Yeah, it's hard when I totally hear you, Carlos. It is hard. We've seen this where someone says, okay, but I don't understand. So can you give me some idea? No. And then if the commissioner says, no, that is not my job to design your project. You just do not meet this. That is not, sometimes it's just not useful for someone who actually doesn't get what you're saying. Like you could say, and I'm just saying, so sometimes you veer off in an attempt to help, and then it may get, you know, and the more you know, and I just want to say this, the more you know about like, oh, well, that's really not going to look like that because just because you drew it that way, you know, and you put your trim up and it's this and aluminum and this and that, and then you get into more detail than you need to, because you know, some of us know that it will really not look the way they think it's going to look, and you know that, so you end up, so I guess it's just to come back to saying less, but sometimes to be clear, you want to help somebody and you want to say something that, I mean, we've seen that. But I mean, I agree that it's really hard to say, like, I've heard that. I heard that when I first started on the commission, it was like, oh, well, we're not here to design. So we, you know, and then people complain. They were like, okay, great. I don't know what to do. What do I do? Then they ask you, Carlos, well, what do we do?
I mean, it can be, you know, my office can always kind of translate to them what it should be done without the commission directly designing for them. But I understand it's a challenge, you know, but again, we're throwing ideas here, you know, I'm just trying to.
Right, no, I think you're right. I think it's good to hear that.
Yeah, because, you know, I see that obviously the commission members have the best intentions when they review a project, and that can lead to other type of conversation that is not necessarily addressing the main point, which is whether or not it meets the standards. And I think that's kind of the core in my mind that we need to remember when we are making comments or having a discussion is, you know, try to keep the conversation within the intent of the standards.
Yeah, no, I think that it's important to come back to that. I'm just saying it's, you know, sometimes these, and then it's tricky when someone absolutely doesn't care. And then you know that, so, and then they just, you know that a client may not.
Right.
Yeah, so before, I know it's 8:55, I just want to get to this because I think it's really important. I think it's really important that the commission, because I don't really know how does the information that our standards, how we're looking at things, how serious we are, how much time we give to this, how is that all conveyed to, the aldermen and women who then may look at projects that are appealed? Who do they ever, Carlos' question, do they ever come to you and say, what the hell are they, please help me understand what the commission is doing, or do they just not care, or how does that play out? City council, what is city council? Do they?
Yeah, well, basically, when somebody is submitting a project, and I will say, for instance, no, don't use vinyl because the commission has not approved vinyl. It's not a compatible material. But I cannot stop the person from applying for what they want. And that's why you see these applications that don't meet the standards. I tried to persuade the applicant to address the standards directly and put an application that should be approved and could be approved rather than not. But when there's a point where they appeal, let's say, they go in front of the commission, and like, for instance, the classical example would be the person who bought the house, had steel windows, he bought the vinyl windows, and when I learned about that, I explained to him, does not meet the standards. And he said, no, I still want to go in front of the commission. And he did.
No, I was talking about something.
I can kind of answer part of it. So oddly, the appeal process before the city council has no role for the commission. And I know Scott and Carlos, one of them are often asked to be there, although I've never heard city council actually ask them. So on some of the appeals, I know you probably watched Elliot, Elect, I know I've watched. I've gotten up and in some cases during the public comment period can speak for 2 minutes. And they seem to listen a little bit of, while the city council, while listening to the, 30 other people up there. It's odd that we're kind of not a party of the appeal and have no role whatsoever, and they don't even seem to know what we did or why. I don't know that the city council would even entertain us having some kind of official role in the appeal. It's also dicey because I think, some of the appeals are, many of the appeals I think that are successful are instances where I think the commission is kind of standing on principle and wants to disapprove things, and maybe has the thought process that if the city council wants to grant an exception to the general rule, that's not so bad, but we don't want to change the general rule. So it's tricky, but we have no official role, and I'm not sure they listen at all as part of the appeal process. It's very odd.
Yeah, so my question is, how can that dynamic change?
I have an observation. I have an observation about this. Having observed the Plan Commission and how they operate, they are always calling the standards out, And my observation is that the council listens to them when they present their standards. So I think we need to stress our standards with them more, and they should learn to respect the same process that we go through, that the Plan Commission goes through.
And how does that happen? Like, who advocates for us?
Well, there's two things. And Jack, you were probably around, because I know the first few times I ever presented before the Preservation Commission, any vote at the end of the case, every commissioner literally, and I know it sounds time consuming, Mark, every single person went down and said which standards they felt were met or not met.
Right.
It was all recorded.
Yes.
And it was made very clear, not only did, we'll pick Jamie voted no, but Jamie said it didn't meet standard 5 and 6 of the list or whatever else. And if need be, you could even say why it didn't. When that's in there, then I think the council reads that. Because when I've been at other towns, they read the minutes of the meeting. They never look at the tapes of the meeting or the videos of the meeting. They don't want to sit through 3 hours, but they'll read the, you know, the minutes. And if the minutes contain the decision, Mark, you're a lawyer. Look at when the judge.
Elliot, I just don't think, I mean, if you've listened to the city council meetings, I think that maybe one of them has actually looked at the case. They're generally decided on broader political things. I mean, the solar energy project in him and those approved. I mean, I did get up there. We're allowed 2 minutes as part of the public comment that is with 42 other people, is hardly listened to. And that, so we're not speaking, they're not reading it. It's like for political reasons, they want solar energy. They're not even slightly aware of the standards. There's no opportunity to present it whatsoever in the current process.
Here's the point that I want to make. There's 2 committees that meet in the 2 hours or so prior to the council meeting. It doesn't seem to me that having you appear at the public forum at the front desk for 2 minutes, just like every other person who's there to complain about stop signs in front of their house, that's when it should be happening. It should be happening at the committee meeting, whether it's Public Works and Administration or whatever else, because that's the forum where if you explain it to those members of that committee, it doesn't become an issue at the council meeting.
It's the city council that hears it. Nobody else does. There's no subcommittee that hears it. So you would, I mean, you could certainly envision a process where at the time of the appeal, the Preservation Commission made a brief presentation. I mean, that would, to me, it's very odd that that doesn't exist.
What Diane used to make, I mean, that
she spoke in the public comment. She spoke in the public comment.
Well, so I guess my question is, Carlos, because you're our link to the city, I think we need some support in some fashion. And how do we get it except by, you know, I go to Melissa Wynn and I talk to her and she says, oh, like I remember, you know, we talked to our alderman, but that we are, you know, we're all volunteering, we're all doing our best and we need some support. And so I'm asking not the commission or the chair, but I'm asking you or Scott, you know, how can we change the way this is set up so that we're taken more seriously, that, you know, what we do isn't just dismissed? That's a question. I have no answer.
Well, if I may, what we see now at the council is not what I'm used to. Because in the past, the commission will make a presentation, or the chair or the staff, about the decision, and I guess I don't necessarily think that the way the council will vote will be much different in the sense that if you look at the ordinance, it says that, you know, the council has to make a decision based on the evidence, the facts, but sometimes, or maybe many times, it doesn't translate that way. So the only means we have currently is the memo that is prepared by a staff, so that we explain the process, the decision of the commission. We put together all the standards that were not met and the final decision of the commission. But the role of staff or the participation of the chair somehow has been put aside. Initially, my recollection is that they wanted to cut the time the council would spend every month, every other Monday, you know, reviewing all the items, and then they basically said, no, you don't need to be there, or the commission doesn't need to, you know, they will read the material. So as far as getting support, I will imagine that, you know, we could talk to the director of our department and maybe have a meeting with her and explain, you know, how the commission would like to conduct its business in front of the council when necessary.
Well, that'd be good.
But that's only a suggestion. I don't know if there are other city council members that feel the same way. But you know, the director of the department is basically the person who can discuss at a higher level, you know, what in her view the committees that our department staffs should get the attention in the council.
Well, can we have that meeting, do you think?
All can I ask is maybe talk to Scott and see how we can approach about this with Johanna,
Yeah,
director.
if you look at the ordinance, the city council is supposed to be looking at the record. So the more clearly that the commission can articulate the reasons for the decision, and as was mentioned earlier, by articulating the standards, which standards are met, which standards are not met, then that information can be transmitted onto the city council.
Right, but Scott, I still think it's like we are just kind of pushed to the wayside. And the same thing happened with this whole solar. I'm feeling this way about the solar guidelines, and we met and we wrote this, and now, however that plays out, I feel like it would be real. I'm asking, I think it'd be really good if we could have just a dialogue with that's Joanna, and just talk about ways to get some more support, because we can be clearer, and that's fine. I don't know, I'm getting this.
Oh, well, wait, clear, Scott, so clear in what? In our final vote? Like, where do we put the words that synthesize, so that, you know, where do we put those words so that they'll actually read it?
To articulate them during the meetings. So in your deliberation on the case.
But they don't watch the meetings or read the entire.
They don't.
That information is presented to the city council as part of the packet, the minutes and the memo.
So I'm still asking if we could set up a meeting. It would be very helpful, and I think it's important. So Carlos, I'm just asking, I think it's a good idea. I'm sure something positive will come from it.
A meeting before appeal, or what?
Or with Joanne, with the head of the department, and just talk with Carlos. Carlos, your boss is who?
My boss is Scott.
Oh, hi.
Joanna.
No, Scott and I work closely, and of course we report to Johanna, but Scott is my manager. And, okay. We can discuss, the two of us, if this would be feasible or not. I just made a suggestion because that's the way I would have approached, similar situation in the past. And again, I don't know if it will make a big difference to do that or not. It's because the council, the members of city council and mayor now have their template how things should go. And I don't know that's going to be easy to change. Just for
I'll go be the first to talk to the mayor. I mean,
yeah, but remember, the mayor is one member of, and the mayor can be overruled. All that stuff.
How about this? Why don't you and Scott talk about some meeting that we could have that, besides just like doing our thing and making things, writing things clear, I think that there is something that we would like that would be different. I mean, I've seen.
I think if you stay within the system without changing too much, is with the public comment. It doesn't only have to be Mark or the chair to talk directly to the council. If we have the block of commissioners going in front of the council when there's considering an appeal, and you speak your mind on why the commission did not approve, I think then you probably have a more reception rather than just the chair talking about the commission's ruling. I think that you have a block of commissioners going to the meeting and say, as a commission, as a citizen, I am telling you this, how we voted and why we voted, not just Mark.
So every commissioner could go, and basically we would strategize what we're going to say and something like that.
I will think that's fair. I think that's a public meeting, and you're speaking as a citizen that happens to be a commissioner.
But I just think I gotta tell you, you know, we work really hard, and I'm just gonna say it again. I would really like you guys, you and Scott, to think about a different access point if it's possible, because I've just seen a lot of, look, these times are tough, and nobody really, I'm sure the city council, they're looking at other things, and Preservation Commission is certainly not high on the priority list, and I get it, but it just does not seem, you know, to me like, so I'm just asking, it just doesn't seem like we have a whole lot of support or are taken, you know, seriously, and we do a lot of work, and we've done very good work for the city and our, you know, for our neighborhoods and for our landmarks. So I'm just asking you and Scott, maybe just to think about if there's a different access point. Done with what I said it like 5 times. Same thing. So.
Okay.
Wait, so it's 9/11. So what are we doing?
Scott was supposed to mute your mic. That was the problem, Julie.
Too bad.
That was the plan. Well, I don't know. I think it seems like we kind of hit all the agenda items. I was just looking at them. Some of them not to the extent that you might have wanted. I think it's the public perception issue, which then becomes the council perception issue. That's really the troublesome part.
One thing that I have suggested in the past, and perhaps might be doable, every time we have an elected official, a new elections, I have suggested many times to the commission to, you know, welcome the new elected officials. It's one way for them to get to know the commission and get to know what they do. And I think that if you do that as appointed members of a commission, that if there's an appeal or a project that is positive, like the resolution that was presented to them, they will remember better than if the first time they had to do with an appeal that is affecting them in their ward, you know? And obviously they are going to try to work with their constituencies, but if they don't know much about the commission, it will be harder for them to visualize what the commission intended to do with the denial and why they did it. So I think that's an opportunity to approach the newly elected officials to just let them know what the commission is all about and who are the commissioners.
Well, it's in this day of COVID-19, it's harder that every time you get a new alderman, we invite them to a tea or a coffee, because it's going to have to be virtual. So I don't know quite how we're going to work that one out. In fact, I was going to ask you how you were going to do this little review with 2 members of the commission and the architect in August, if we're all still doing it virtually, or is that how we're going to have to do it?
I will imagine it's the same way we set up for the regular meeting.
That's going to be much harder.
Everything is really hard right now. Architecture's hard to do remotely, and Zooming everything. So I guess we'll just do the best we can. Who's the newly elected official that we're like taking to lunch?
Next April. Isn't it next April's the election?
I think it's next year, yeah.
So Julie, don't worry about it.
Oh yeah, we're off. Yeah, you guys do not have to deal with us anymore.
It's been fun.
You can still approach the elected officials as former commissioners and citizens.
You know, it would be great if we had an elected official or council member just come to one of our meetings.
I wanted to have, I've seen, who is it? Melissa sat in on one, I think at one time. I don't remember if Ann ever did. It's pretty rare.
Judy Fisk has come to our meetings.
Who has?
Yeah.
Judy Fisk.
Yeah.
Judy Fisk.
Oh, she has.
Yeah.
Now, Melissa Wayne may be in the past.
That's about it.
Yeah,
Robin Ruth Simmons was at all the meetings on the Foster School and
Oh, yeah.
definitely appreciated what we did.
yeah, but that was because it was, that wasn't just like coming to see, oh, how does it work?
No, she was there to,
But actually, she's actually one of the few that has that kind of positive vibe about us, I think, because of it.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was important.
I would think that Alderman Simmons probably is more in tune with the commission's role because of the resolution. Yes,
Yeah,
he
well,
understands better.
I noticed that they listed all those homes the other day, and then there were complaints about them not being in certain wards were excluded from that list of buildings.
Well, they missed the line that says that there will be more to come.
I know.
It's not exclusive. This is just beginning of it.
Okay, well,
Hey, it's been fun, everybody.
So do we have to officially adjourn the meeting and then?
Do we have to move? I move that we adjourn the meeting. Somebody has.
I second.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.